just create, just see what happens with no regard to any of your audience is you. That's your audience. That's your inner child, your future self saying, you know what, I'm proud of you. Great job. That's who I'm catering to. The outside people, they'll get it sooner or later.
Create for No Reason is your weekly dose of inspiration to create what you believe should exist in the world. It's where passion meets craft, and we explore the joy of the creative process and building a meaningful body of work. This episode is packed with creativity because I was joined by my friend Quantal Langford. He is a graphic designer, a podcaster, a total creative. He is an artist and a writer, a designer. He does all the things. So we got into it. We got into all the creative process, the challenges that people face during the creative process. We talked a lot about his podcast because he has done over 200 episodes. And we talked about consistency, what it takes to be consistent, and all the fun things that we get to talk about around the creative process. So I hope you enjoy this episode. Quantal, I am so excited to chat with you.
Glad to be here. Glad to be here. Good. Like I say, good seeing you again. I know it's been a while, so I do like to. I always like to hear like what what things are going on, like what's happened in this journey. So, but yeah, glad to be here.
It's going to be a fun conversation because we're kind of recording a catch-up session, really, because you and I did an episode years ago. So I was on your podcast, you were on my podcast, but that was back in 2021. So it's been a little while. Time flies when you're having fun creating stuff. And I wanted to, so I reached out to you because I was like, oh my gosh, it's been too long. And I wanted to do this episode around some of the projects that you're working on. You have continued to do your podcast, which is awesome because as we both know, as podcasters, many people love to start podcasts. Lots of people don't love to continue to do a podcast.
Yeah.
And as we're recording this, you have 226 episodes of your podcast. So share with us what your podcast is about, and then we're going to dig into how do you keep going.
Yeah. The good question. As I said, the podcast is called the Creative Brew, and it's really a culmination of creativity. It's really based around creativity, but I do mix in because I'm just a curious soul, and I love mixing in creativity. Just things with mindset, leadership, crazy topics. I love comic books. I love sci-fi. All those things are me. So all I'm doing is figuring out ways of really just trying to share stories with other people, with other like-minded individuals, or even individuals that may be completely different from me. But I love hearing people's insights and what makes them tick. Especially for my creators. How do they create certain things? What's their process like? What's the ups and downs of it? Because with social media, it can, people can see all the highlights, but they don't see like all the struggles and all the work put into it. So I'm always curious about that more than like the actual product. Like, what was the process and what was the inspiration and struggles behind that? That's what I love. But I love to conversate over really the premise for the most part is over I love to conversate over over coffee. So I generally record at different coffee shops, and I bring different people on and really just share their story. I'm really big on stories. I love sharing stories. I love hearing them. I think that is the sort of the fabric almost of the way it used to be. We used to be able to share stories even with our families, and those get passed along. But I find myself I think we lose that sometimes, and really trying to bring that back. So,
and what I love is that people's stories, they often don't understand how interesting they are because of exactly what you just said. It's great to be able to see the end result. Like, oh, I finished this book, or I created this thing and here it is, and I'm just giving it to you. But that's not as interesting as this is the process it took me to get there. These are the challenges that I had to overcome. This is the way I thought about approaching it. And I discovered that there was actually an easier way. And this is what I went through. And then I took that lesson and brought it to my next creative project. Those are the conversations that we want to hear because those are the things that we're going through.
Yes.
And so I love that you're bringing those conversations. I mean, that's this is why we are friends, because we have the same kind of premise for our shows. And you've done a few, just a couple more than I have so far, but I'm gonna catch up. And out of all the episodes that you've done, and because you're such a curious person and you're such a lifelong learner, are there any are there any stories or lessons that you have found particularly interesting, or just some that really stand out to you?
Yeah, probably. Yeah, there's been a few stories. It's been one where even and like I said, I'll give a quick shout out to my friend Eliza that's out here. She's a chef out here, and but she was a 2020 Food Network Chop champion,
Oh,
and so
cool.
she's really good. She makes some amazing homemade pasta. It's crazy. But hearing her story, and you see, some of the accolades she's had, but at the same time, things that she struggled with, and really just figuring out ways of, we talked about like finding your breadcrumbs. So understanding like there's certain things in everyone's life and everyone's journey that uh, maybe God puts that out there, and your job, your quest is to figure out ways of following those breadcrumbs and see where it goes. Sometimes you'll take just some crazy roads and you meet interesting people. Sometimes you get to your destination, but it's just understanding that everyone has those talents, those gifts, or those opportunities, and our job is to figure out, are we courageous enough to go after it, or do we cater to what other people have said, say, hey, I want you need to go this direction because it's the quote unquote safe route, or it's comfortable, instead of going after what your soul, what your heart is longing for, or what it's capable of doing. But that story sort of stuck out because we really talked about like following those little breadcrumbs, and sometimes we get in our head and we say we're going this other route because it's safe, we know it, instead of sort of going out into the unknown and seeing what could transpire, and beautiful things can culminate from that.
So, how can someone that's listening who is maybe playing a little safe, maybe there's a creative project that they are interested in pursuing, or they have a dream in their heart that they've been talking about for far too long, and they're kind of stuck in their comfort zone, but they want to get started. What advice would you give to a person that hasn't created as much as you?
Yeah, I generally, the way that I think, especially when I'm creating various things, that first of all, I want to be in that practice. And I'm very fortunate, and even with other creators, we're very fortunate to be able to have that practice of creating constantly. But for people that maybe they're sitting on the bench and they're like, man, I would love to get this project out, or I've got this ideal. I would sort of envision yourself, or maybe write it down, like, what would you tell your younger self right now? um, if your younger self was sitting beside you waiting for you to put this out, like what excuse would you give your younger self? That's things like I personally, for me, like I always think about, like, I know I have to get certain things out because like I want to make my younger self proud, and at the same time I want to make my future self proud. So right now, like, I'm always sort of figuring out, like, those people maybe are younger and older versions of us, or future versions of us, they're rooting us on. And we have to be courageous enough to say, you know what, I'm just going to put this out there, regardless. But if it was your younger version, like, what excuse could you give your younger version and say, look, I didn't do this because maybe I wanted to watch Netflix. I've got this great idea, but like, I just want to sit, I don't think I can put this out. Your younger self don't care. Like, kids, they don't care. Like, they just put things out. So I'm always amazed, even with little nieces and nephews, when I go back into town, and back in Tennessee, and we're always creating. Like, they have no, everything's across the board. They can care less what people think about what they make. Somehow or another, we get under the illusion that, and yes, we do cater to clients, but even if it's your personal work, like, who are you catering to? Like, your outside audience or your younger self? And those are the things that I always think about, and that's something I would sort of propose to anyone that's maybe on the fence. Like, what would you tell your younger self?
I love that. And it's This is, I love that you said that so much. And I'm only laughing because one of my projects that I'm working on right now is I'm working to put together a journal. So I have all these journaling prompts. And I'm not even joking. One of the prompts that I added this morning was, what advice would you give to your younger self? And what advice do you think your future self would offer you today?
Yep.
I mean, look, we are meant to be friends,
Yep.
Quantel. We are
Yes, we
meant
are.
to be friends. And that's awesome. As you were talking, it reminded me of my little nephew, because I have two nephews and a niece, and they are adorable, all of
Yeah.
them. But Ryan, who is just the cutest thing ever, when if he does something, whether it is playing a sport or he drew a picture or whatever it was, and when he shows it to you, he'll be like, I'll say, "Oh, you did this?" And he's like, "Yeah." I was like, "It's amazing." And he's like, "I know." It's like,
That's
even if it's not that amazing, it's just the funniest thing. How I remember my sister telling me, even in sports, he wouldn't be the best player on the team, but he acts like he is. He
yeah.
gets off that. He gets off that with his teammates, and he's like, "We did it. Best. I'm so great." And it's like, wow, to have that level of confidence, we should all, right? We should all approach life with that level of
Yeah.
confidence, because only with that confidence can you keep going. Can you
Yeah.
strive to get better, right? It's
Yeah.
like not continuing to have confidence if you're not doing the work to prove that you're getting better. But when you have that level of confidence, knowing that, hey, I'm new to this, but I'm just going to show up and I'm going to do my best. And today, my best is awesome, and then
Yep.
I'm getting better and growing. And that can be really challenging, especially when you're creating consistently. So talk about, how do you create that consistently? Because again, going back to your podcast, most people don't continue a show, right? Like it's so easy to just give up. So how do you continue to show up for yourself and for your listeners and have so many hundreds of episodes?
Yeah, I think honestly, I think it goes back to like my sports background. I am brutally once I get going, I'm really consistent, and sometimes stubborn. It's one of those where like not every episode is great, but it's still I still put it out anyway because it causes me to be like, okay, at least I can get the feedback and understand, okay, what things could I've done a little bit better, but at least just getting in the act of just putting it out there. That's really the biggest thing. I think for a lot of people, like, that because I'll get people talk to me all the time, like, hey, I want to do this podcast, or I want to talk about this or that or whatever. And I was like, that's cool, but at least like just get in the habit of like recording or at least put something out there. I think everyone feels like if I'm not Joe Rogan or something, then it's gonna be a wash. And like that's the mindset. Like I don't want you to don't want you to have. It's just understanding like, hey, if you got if you got a story or you got something you want to share out in the world, it's your mission to just put it out there. You're gonna have an audience. Someone is going to listen to it. I don't think I've heard of any podcast that had no listeners. So someone you're like I said, you're a great fit for someone out there, and I truly believe that. But it's just getting in the habit of feeling like let's just get the resistance out the window and just like, hey, let's just put it out there and see what happens. I mean, my first probably 7 to 8 episodes was horrible. I don't think I really sort of figured out my voice or what I wanted to really target until maybe episode 30 or 40. um, and then I started sort of figuring out, okay, this is the direction I want to go. This is, some of the questions I want to ask. And it's constantly shifting. There's things that people talk to me about, like, hey, would you talk about this on your podcast? And there's certain things like I won't do it. I'll have people ask me, hey, like if you talk about politics, you probably blow your podcast up. I'm like, no, I don't want to do that. That's not who I am. That's not what the show is about. So yeah, it's just one of those is like figuring out who you are, find your voice, and like I said, be confident enough. Like I said, what our inner child, be confident enough to just put it out there and don't care. Um, you know, it's it's gonna your audience will find you sooner or later.
Before we pressed record, we were talking a little bit about downloads, and do you look at your downloads? Like, how do you go into your podcast or really any creative project and assess the success? Like, what is that? How do you look at success for your creative projects?
I don't know. I mean, yeah, it's a good question. I mean, for success for me is just if I feel confident that I created something that was really worth something to somebody, and just being confident to put it out there. I think a lot of podcasters don't realize like the energy that they put out there. If you come into a podcast episode and maybe you're trying to record or you're trying to create something and you come in with the right intention or the right energy, you could have a what you feel like would be a poor podcast episode and really resonate with people. Or you can have something to where, hey, I want to be like Russell Brand or Joe Rogan, and you don't have the right energy or attention behind it. It tends to fall short, and then you get down on yourself because like, oh, I didn't have the downloads I thought I would because I would talk. Maybe I was trying to talk on maybe the same trends or topics that some of the bigger podcasters were, talking about. And so they sort of fall into those little trends. I don't want to do that. My job is to share stories. I'm a storyteller, and my job is to share stories and at the same time, give stories, and hopefully it helps out people within my audience. If I end up having a huge audience, that's great. But the mission is the same. My vision and how I proceed with the podcast is the same. But yeah, it's just one of those where I try not to. I mean, I look at the downloads and I sort of see, okay, what things maybe people are downloading, but I don't really track my success on that. My job is to figure out ways of just putting it out there. That's success to me. Like if I just ship it, that is it. Because I have so much going on in my brain and so much things that I write down. My job is to create it and put it out there. I'm putting forth the right intention. How anyone takes it, that'll be up to them. But my job is just to ship it.
What's your process when you think about, well, over the years, how have you decided what guests to bring on, what topics to go over? Like, how do you think about that and approach that in the process?
Yeah, generally, everyone. I tend to get people on the sort of the creativity slash entrepreneurship, maybe thought leader space. I tend to get that batch of as far as potential guests. But I do love like sort of going out, and that's why I've been thinking about like maybe I should maybe do another podcast, but I don't know about that. But even trying to even with the whole premise of the creative brew, like I want to be able to brew and stir different topics. So really everything's on the table, but I do want to funnel it down towards what is the creative journey for everyone, and everyone's different. Maybe there's been people that's dealt with drugs and somehow they transitioned, got through it, and they become a motivational speaker. Like I love stories like that. Or someone that had a crazy idea or maybe just a dumb idea, and that idea sort of maybe helped their family out and helped out millions of people. Like just crazy stories like that. Like I love hearing those. Or even people that maybe they wanted to do a podcast because they had a pain point. Maybe there's something like people weren't maybe it was other people that wasn't saying what was on their mind. So they was like, hey, I'm just gonna start this podcast and focus towards, 30 to 35-year-old females that love wine. I don't know. It could be, it could be anything, but I mean it's just one of those to where like I just enjoy stories like that. Like how like what was the what inspired you to even do this? And everyone has those moments. And in comic books, they call them like little canon moments, like in the Spider Verse. Like there's specific moments in time for everyone that they can go one direction or the other, and it happens for everyone. And there are a lot of people they're courageous enough they go this direction. Sometimes they fall back to what's safe for them. But everyone has those events all through the course of their life, and your job is sort of figuring out what those opportunities or those moments are and seizing it and really trying to decide, hey, can I go forward with this? Maybe I could create this, or maybe I could build this. Everyone has those ideals. It's just figuring out ways of going forward with the things that you desire, the things that's on your heart.
That reminds me of this book that I read. So I'm not a huge fiction reader. Well, I'm getting more and more into fiction as the years go on. A few years ago, I started reading more fiction. So, and now I'm really I'm enjoying it. It's different for my brain because
Yeah.
I'm such a nonfiction reader. But there's this book called Maybe in Another Life, and so when you talk about the paths people take, like this whole book is basically it's this woman who she made a decision. It's almost like you're seeing she had to make a decision and you're seeing how the decision played out in both ways throughout the book, which is really cool, which is also kind of like that movie Sliding Doors with Gwyneth Paltrow, the
Mhm.
one where she misses the train and then or she makes the train and you get
Yeah.
to see both play out. And I think about that sometimes with creative projects because if you, as you put, if you are courageous enough to go after your creativity and pursue something, it is going to lead you in a completely different path. And what I think is so interesting, and I'm sure you've found this with your listeners, you might start a podcast and realize 10 episodes in, oh, I actually don't want to do this podcast. I really want to write a book, or I
Yeah.
really want to have a YouTube channel, or I really want to, you just never know. And that's what's so exciting to me. I feel like in any type of creative endeavor, if you feel any kind of inspiration to do it, it's like that push.
Yeah.
That push that's kind of it's that little whispering voice, and you can either push it down or you can allow it to come in, and then you actually do something with it. And one of the things that you said that I appreciate is, hey, I've done some episodes and they haven't been great, and I still put them out because you have a different standard of what great is. And so to you, maybe it's not to the standard where you think it should go out, but to somebody else, it is exactly what they needed to hear. And that's what I find interesting about the creative process too, is that sometimes you work so hard on an episode or a piece of art or whatever, and you put it out and you think it's going to be the best thing ever and get all these views and likes, and it doesn't do anything. Meanwhile, the episode that quote unquote wasn't great is the one that really resonated with more people. So you just never know when you put
Yep.
something out into the world.
Yep. Yep. I mean, it's just being in the constant practice of doing that. I mean, even and say I'm one of those where I'm doing a lot of different things. So that I think for that it funnels my creativity in all kinds of weird ways. So even with running a design business and doing podcasting, like I do part-time coaching too. So and along with doing like volunteer work with the homeless out here. So it's just one of those where like all these experiences, all these people um, funnel into what I'm doing and like how I come up with certain things or maybe what I talk about. Everyone's stories is different, it's fascinating, but those are the things that help fuel my creativity. But that's if some big company came up and they said, you know what, hey, we love your podcast and we want to sign you to a great deal. You know what? I was like, that's great. If no one ever approaches me, I'm still going to be doing this anyway. And I think some people's metrics, they get too tied up on the metrics to understand like what is the story, what is the creative outlet you're trying to put out? Like what are you trying to communicate? If you're following trends, you'll burn out quick. But if you're following like your heart, you're following your soul, your spirit, you'll keep going. And it doesn't matter if great opportunities come through or if no opportunities come through, you're still going to be creating. That was something that was, I do feel like even with creativity and for a lot of creators, like this is a just a natural, this is a gift and a blessing to be able to just create stuff. Like I mean, I look around. I mean, I'm looking around my studio right now, but like even like with my coffee cups that I make and like all these crazy things that I've created is like you have the God-given talent to be able to do this on a daily basis. And at the same time, like you get paid to do it. And even with this podcast, like I'm finally getting sponsorships and stuff now. But it's just one of those like you get to do this every day. You can create anything you want to. And with things like sometimes it can be scary, but at the same time, it's so amazing. And like I said, I don't want to take granted for it. Like I love to be able to like just put it out there, almost saying not to say I'm focused on things that I want to work on and want to create, but at the same time, if I get a chance to just play, just create, just see what happens. With no regard to any of your audience is you. That's your audience. That's your inner child, your future self saying, you know what, I'm proud of you. Great job. That's who I'm catering to. The outside people, they'll get it sooner or later.
They'll get it sooner or later. You said you were thinking about starting another podcast. What would your other podcast be?
Yeah, that's because it's just one of those where like I'm trying to figure out like if I need to just sort of stay within the Creative Brew and then just add in certain topics. But I mean, I don't know. I love sort of fringe topics. I'm always been one of those like if I wasn't a sort of a if I wasn't a creative, I would probably be like some kind of theoretical physicist. Like I love like science. I love like weird quantum physics. Sci-fi, like sci-fi elements. Things with multiple parallel realities and stuff like that. So even like talking about what we just talked about, like, hey, if you take one option or the other, where do those go? And do you eventually get to the destination that you're maybe predestined for? Who knows? But I like playing around with those theories. I like those stuff. Like I always think about like even like when I'm walking around, like I love nature, but even like walking around and like I see the stars at night, and I'm like, wow, like I wonder who's like looking at the stars at the same time, like wondering who's on Earth, or maybe there's other planet, like weird little like just things like that. Like that's for me, that's like I've always been a curious spirit, and those are the things that sort of funnel. Even like with my art book, the premise on that was worlds within worlds. So like, how many like if we had access to all these things, all these other worlds, like who's actually out there, or it's crazy. Yeah, I know, but it's just one of those where like that's where my creative mind goes. And but
So, two things. One, have you read the book Dark Matter?
not yet. I would love to.
Well, did you know that they created a series out of it?
Nuh-uh.
Yeah, they created a series. It's on Apple TV, I think. You will love the book. I actually liked the book more than the series, I think, because I don't know, but it's so good. And it's all about that. It's all about like the different, just all these different lives that we might be living in all these different universes.
Yeah,
It is, if you love all that stuff, you will love this book. I highly recommend.
yeah,
And what I think is, so you could have a whole pot. This is the challenge with creatives, right, Quantal? We have all these ideas
yeah,
and we want to do all of them, because I think about that too. There's so many things that I want to explore and pursue that I'm curious about, but then if you don't have some kind of focus, then your efforts are really not gonna you're not going to be pushed forward in any of them if you're just kind of too scattered.
yeah,
So it's almost like you have to have that balance,
yeah,
which can be really challenging, especially for, I know my listeners are very multi-passionate as well, and they have a lot of ideas and things. But what I think is cool for you is that what you're curious about and interested in, that while it might not be exactly the same kind of topics, it would be cool for you to be able to, maybe you test and say, hey, once a month, I'm going to do an episode on this and just test it out.
yeah,
Because I think sometimes we think, oh, it has to be a whole completely different thing. Maybe not. Maybe you just add it to your existing podcast, and just, you can even like preface it with an intro like, hey, I'm curious about this, just like you're curious about other topics. Stick around. This is the first episode we're doing. This is what the topic is. I hope you like it. And if you don't, just know that these are going to be episodes that you'll probably want to skip when I bring them, the next time they come out,
yeah,
just to kind of preface your audience, because they're so used to like this one thing.
yeah.
But do that. And then you'll be able to kind of scratch that itch and also see if maybe there's a bigger audience for that.
Yeah. So I may do that. That's actually a pretty good idea. So that's what, yeah. So that's why I made the art book, because I wanted to play more with those kind of concepts and ideas. So I was like, let me just make a book and at least sort of express that in some way and put that out there. But yeah, I do. I am very interested in a lot of those topics, and but I think that's been part of me too. And all I'm doing is just trying to follow those breadcrumbs. That's something I've been very enamored with since I was like a little kid. It's been art and it's been science, and I've been trying to figure out ways of merging the two together. But those are the things like hey, I'm passionate about. I love it. If I was a multimillionaire, I would literally still be doing the same thing that I love to do. I don't care. My job on this planet is to create and communicate ideals, and just give some inspiration to other people that's trying to do their own thing. That's so.
Yeah. Ah, you're so awesome. I love how passionate you are about all this stuff. So, all right, that's my challenge for you today,
All right.
Quantel. My challenge is that you pick a month and you pick a date, and
Okay.
this is when I'm gonna put my first one out. And send it to me. I'll listen to it.
All
I love listening to that kind of stuff. I'm fascinated. Do you believe in past lives?
right. Yes, I do. Yes, I
Ooh,
do.
I wonder if maybe you were some like crazy artist in another life.
You know what? It's no telling. I mean, I think the more, even like doing research for the one book I've been working on or developing for years, like I find myself like finding and researching like all these different things, and you start to go down that rabbit hole. And the more that I think about it, and the more that I connect with other people, and I really do feel like everyone's had those sort of incarnations. It may not, you may not be the same person, or even creed or whatever, but or even nationality, but or race. But at the same time, I do feel like there's, at the essence, there's just a little bit of you that sort of goes through each cycle, and it's, maybe it's just a way of learning and experiencing. Maybe, like I said, we're the culmination of all of our grandparents and parents, and the people before us. We're like the culmination of all those, and all that. I really do feel like all that stuff gets passed down, memories, past things. So like if there's might be certain inclinations, might be certain things like you love to do. Maybe that was something someone else was doing, 100 years ago. Like they had that same gift or that same talent, and you're just figuring out ways of expressing that, maybe more efficiently, or maybe it's just right timing, right opportunity. So it's just one of those where, like, yeah, I do. I really do feel like, hey, maybe I was some, past, crazy, creator, or maybe some kind of shopkeeper, or maybe I was a some kind of warrior or something like that back in my past life.
Ooh.
Like, you just never know. It's just like certain things, like you gravitate towards certain hobbies or interests. Don't be surprised if that was things you may have been doing in a previous life. You never know. We don't. There's so much stuff that we don't know about ourselves and about this planet. Like, we don't know.
Yeah. Yeah, that's why I always find it so fascinating when you read things. I mean, every time I listen to or every time I read Marcus Aurelius's meditations,
Hmm.
it's like wild because we all learn and relearn the same things over and over in different generations. It's like you read stuff like with stoicism, and it was all the way back with all these stoic philosophers, and they're writing things that are so relevant and pertinent today. It's almost as if they could have been written last week, and we're reading them and they're so meaningful. And you know what, when we're long gone and it's 100 years from now, that's still going to resonate with people because it's people, and
Yep.
people are people.
Yeah, I mean, I read stuff from Epictetus every day, and just an excerpt, and I'm like, this stuff is so prevalent to right now. It's
Yeah,
amazing. It's
it's
crazy.
wild. It's absolutely wild. So what are you working on now? You just when did you release your art book?
Yeah, I actually just released it. I released it probably a few months ago. I released it. I've got it in digital form on Apple Books, and then I self-published it. So really just did a crash course in in publishing, and like, hey, how do I make an Apple iBook? And I stood there for like 2 days, like getting it laid out and putting it out there and setting up my account for that. So it was a good little like learning experience. But yeah, it's been out for a couple of months. I've got it at a art shop here in Oceanside, and then, like I said, just trying to market and promote it while I can. So I'll usually try to really try to market it. Like, I got it on my website, but I'm trying to do a better job sort of just promoting it. But generally, I've got so many little things going on, so I can only do so much. But I did want to at least get in the habit of publishing before I work on the main book. Um, so at least get me in the habit, like, okay, at least I got something out there. Now let's build the momentum to, put out something else. So
What's the main book?
the main book is called Seed. So I actually got a snippet in here in the so right here is that's the artwork that I created. So
So cool.
that's the yeah, pretty much the some of the characters from the book that I'm working on. But yeah, it's really off of that sci-fi, parallel lives theme. It's one of those where you have an alien object that appears. I actually have it appearing off the coast of Oceanside out here, and just wipes out everything. And it cuts to like I think like 3 or 4 years later, and then you see the ramifications of everything that's happened. The object that sort of awakened and wiped out the pretty much the West Coast, it starts to reawaken again. And at the same time, you got these individuals that they'll find out sooner or later how they're all interconnected, but they start getting certain dreams and memories, past life stuff. Then they start getting access to abilities, and then trying to figure out the mystery of that object, because there are certain things that has to be done, or that object is pretty much going to do uh, almost like a rewipe of civilization. So like this object has appeared before, like 100 thousands of years in Earth's past, and it does a general sort of recycle of civilizations. So if they can't figure out what the secret is, or what the mystery is, or how to access it, then it's pretty much going to wipe out the entire civilization, unless they figure out what the secret is, in order to connect with it. So
So wait,
um,
is that that's a book? Like it's a book? Like you're writing
yeah,
this?
yeah.
Oh my gosh, that is so cool.
Yep. So that's I would call that like I guess my magnum opus. Like this is my masterpiece. This is my great work that I'm trying to work on.
So how far along are you?
Right now I've written like 150 pages, but my I've been trying to figure out, because I was gonna have it like as just like a graphic novel and do that, but I wanted to. There's so much information in there. Like I wanted to make sure that I had everything that I wanted to. So I'm actually gonna switch it to more of like a almost like a hybrid like graphic novella type book. So it'll be a mix of illustration and long form written content. So I wanted to do it in that fashion, because I just didn't see it as just a comic book or graphic novel. It was like so much information I wanted to put in there, but I don't like trying to write gigantic books either. So I'm trying to find a mix between the two that's that's a really good read. And at the same time, I've got illustrations. You see the characters, you see the setting and the environment. So it's sort of like a mix of like really sort of like cyberpunk. Think of like I'm trying to mix something between like the Matrix and Dune,
Ooh.
with a little bit of Blade Runner. So that's what the mix is.
That's so cool. All right.
Yeah.
Well, we're going to have you come back on and talk about that whole process, because I love talking about the writing process of people. Now you're putting in the design and the mix. That would be so cool. And you know what would be cool? I don't know if you do this already, but, and it would also, this would be another thing that would kind of scratch your itch on the podcasting side to talk about that and
Mhm.
those kinds of topics that you're so curious about, would be getting on, being a guest on those types of podcasts.
Oh, yeah, I would love to. I mean, I think that's something that I've been, not to say I've been on the fence about, but really trying to figure out like what the evolution of my creativity, or what I'm trying to communicate. There's things that I've been wanting to talk about or been wanting to connect with, but trying to find the avenue in order to do that. But yeah, like I said, I would love to jump on and talk about certain concepts like that. And but that
Yeah.
brings out more of the sort of the ancient alien, scientist out of me, to where like that's something like I've been wanting to do. I told my wife, I was like, if you saw me on Ancient Aliens, I could see myself on Ancient Aliens, like talking about like different beings or whatever. Like I could see myself on there and be
Oh
fine with it.
my god. Is that show still around?
I think it's still around. I haven't been able to catch like new episodes, but I think it's still going. I think it's still going.
That's so funny. Well, that could be well, list. I mean, you have gazillions of things to do. I'm not just adding to your to-do list, but it would be cool to create a list of maybe 20 podcasts that you would like to be a guest on, and
Yeah,
maybe even just send them a copy of your book and say, "Hey, I'm really curious this," or you could send them a copy of your book and maybe one of the episodes that you do on your podcast and say, if you're interested in having a conversation around this and you're looking for guests, because especially like those smaller podcasts that, they have like they have some, like you said, they have an audience, some type
yeah,
of audience. And it would be good to be able to kind of hear from those other folks. And then also, again, you have the opportunity to kind of just come on and share your message without having to do all the other work, like producing your own
yeah,
episode.
yeah.
So anyway, that would be cool. All right. Obviously, yeah, I'm giving you homework today
Yeah, no, I got homework. I was like,
on this episode.
oh,
Well, no, it's as you're talking, I'm just laughing because you are you are creating so much stuff. And one of the pieces that, or one of the things that you said that you kind of glossed over that I think is important is, oh, well, I didn't know how to get a book up on Apple, and I just spent a day and I figured it out and I did it. And you say it so casually because that's who you are, and I feel the same, right? That's who I am.
yeah,
If I don't know how to do something, I reach out to someone who I know has done it before, or I Google it or YouTube. We have everything that we need. We have every piece of information we could possibly need to create or do whatever we want to do. And so many people use that as an excuse to not create, to
yeah,
not pursue their dreams. And so I just want to applaud you and acknowledge that, because that is something that you that's just your nature, but it's not in a lot of people.
yeah,
So I
yeah,
just think
yeah.
that's
Yeah.
incredible.
The piggyback off that, I'm just one of those like, because I've got a lot of things that sort of come through. So sometimes I'm like, man, I would love to. That's a cool idea, but I may not have the energy to actually pursue it. Like once I lock in into something like, hey, this is what I'm going to do, then it's then that sort of that stubbornness. I think I get that from my mom, like that just brutal stubbornness. Like I will keep working on this until I figure it out. That's just usually if I lock in, that's just how I am. But
Yeah.
other than that, I'll sit there and like, hey, there's ideas. I'm like, oh, that's cool. That's cool. If I can put forth the energy, then I'll focus. But once I lock in, I'm like, okay, I want to learn how to do this, or I want to learn how to podcast, or I want to learn how to, design a book. I will look through all the information and I'll start just experimenting and figuring it out, really figuring it out until I get it out there. That's just I don't know. I think it's just the way my brain is wired. But
No, that's good. I mean, hey, that's why you have created as much as you've created, because most of the time people, they stop themselves. If you haven't done something, you don't know how to do it. But again, there are resources out there and not everybody goes after those.
yeah.
Quantal, you are so awesome. It was so wonderful to catch up. We will definitely have to have you come back on maybe in like another year so that we can hear about your book. The book writing process is always fascinating to people, especially, and yours is even more complex just because you're adding the design component to it and that kind of piece. So would love to hear more about that creative process as well. So we'll have to do this again.
Sounds good. Sounds good.
Well, thank you so much for taking the time, and good luck with all your projects. And I am excited to hear your first episode around your creative, weird, dark matter episode
Yeah, I'm gonna do it.
universe.
You have inspired me. I'm gonna record just something crazy, something I've been sort of thinking about, and I'm just gonna put it out there. And
Yes.
but that's just but it's just one of those where like I do believe like you put that out with the right intention, the right energy, and that's something that I'm really passionate about. Like I love not necessarily like figuring out things, but I love seeking. And I love like just being out on that journey. I'm like, man, like there's so much that for all of our technology and all the things that we have, like there's so much that we don't know. Maybe that's like I said, that I think that's just the seeker in me. So
All right, Quantel, I always ask my guests this last question. What is one activity the listeners can do in 10 minutes or less to live a more creative life?
Great question. I would say write down more reasons to be in gratitude. I think the more that you constantly sort of feed the things that or maybe just seeing the things that you're in gratitude for, it could be within creativity, it could be life, nature, anything that you see. The more things you can do to sort of nurture that gratitude, it comes back to you in weird ways. So just being even, personally for me, even just saying, hey, you know what? Thank you for giving me I have to stand in gratitude for giving me the abilities to create, or anything like that, or just the ability to just get up and see a sunrise, or seeing the laughter on a child when they're drawing something. Like all those things, all that energy, all that gratitude comes back to you in really weird ways. So really write down more reasons to be in gratitude. It's easy to be negative. So
Oh, beautiful. I love that. All
so
right.
that's what I got.
That's what I got. I love it. Amazing. I told you this episode was packed with creativity. I hope that there was at least one idea. There has to have been at least one idea that is going to inspire you to push your creative dreams forward. Quantel creates so much stuff, doesn't he? It's just listening to him talk it is really inspiring because it really shows us that when we have that creative dream in our heart, it's up to us to go after it. We have to forget about the resistance, forget about all the excuses and all the reasons why we shouldn't pursue them, and really focus on all the reasons why we should, and doing whatever it takes to just start, to just get out there, to explore your curiosity, to see what's meant for you, and to create what only you can create. So I hope this episode has inspired you. And until next time, go create something.